Hello and welcome to iBuzz. I'm your host Nosheen Bukhari, bringing you the latest and most exciting entertainment news from showbiz world. In today's episode, we will be talking about Amazon to bring Lord of the Rings back as a TV series, followed by Time's Up condemning Disney over a gender attack on Scarlett Johansson, and of course a movie review on Pride and Prejudice. But first things first, let me quickly take you to the top stories of the day. Kanye West hints at collaborations with The Weeknd. Amazon to launch Lord of the Rings TV series in September 2022. Time's Up condemns Disney over gendered attack on Scarlett Johansson over lawsuit. Italian company seeks $1.8 million in damages from Kendall Jenner. Becoming Led Zeppelin, the band's first authorized documentary is now complete. The new Venom Let There Be Carnage trailer is released. Amazon's multi-million-dollar TV version of The Lord of the Rings will launch in September 2022, Amazon Studios said on Monday. To discuss this further, we are joined by entertainment journalist Mohar Basu. Mohar, welcome to the show.
Nosheen.
Mohar, Amazon Prime is all set to bring the blockbuster fantasy back to screen, turning it into a series. What are your thoughts on that?
So, of course, it's a childhood favorite for all of us, and it's such a nice, bittersweet, nostalgic thing. My only fear is when someone is trying to make classics, remember to be authentic and do not screw it up, guys. That's my constant fear when someone's touching classics.
Right. The streaming service hopes that the yet-to-be-titled series will rival the success of Game of Thrones. It is a huge claim. Do you think so?
Yeah, I agree. That's a huge claim because when there's a show of this nature, it has to live up to a lot of things. It has to live up to scale, expectations. It has to live up to people's expectations emotionally because, like I said, it's a childhood favorite for all of us. So we need to be very we are the target audience, and we need to be pleased. And they need to strike a balance between the scale of it and the sweetness of the story. So I hope they're able to do that. But that's a very tall claim to make. Game of Thrones is hard to match, and they've done a masterful job on Game of Thrones. So they really need to do a great job on this to kind of up that.
Absolutely. Now, Mohar, previously the movie franchise seemed to be wrapping up the entire story in its trilogy, and now, of course, the cast is also different. So the question is, how, in your opinion, Lord of the Rings will be able to make its position among the top seasons once released?
One cannot 100% be sure. There are a lot of shows that are launched amidst a lot of hoopla, and there's a great expectation of this show. But in case of this particular series, I feel a lot will depend on the writing of it and the execution of it. Remember, they're making it for a world-class audience that has kind of grown up in the last 4-5 years watching Netflix and Amazon, and the content there is top-notch. So it cannot be television anymore. It has to be better than that in terms of writing and execution, because the Twitter's waiting to rip you apart. So they gotta do a fantastic job, and one cannot be sure of how good they are unless they have done a great job on the writing table. So once that is clear, I think one can safely gauge kahan ja rahi hai.
Absolutely. And the times when Lord of the Rings trilogies were releasing, not everybody was a film critic. It was, criticism on the movies was especially meant for the movie critics. But now, since you have said that Twitter is ready to, rip you apart, everybody is ready to, give an opinion according to their own liking. So they got to be very careful.
They got to be very careful. But I have to say something. I feel Lord of the Rings is kind of a story that lends itself naturally to a series in that sense. And I feel this is a better way of doing it than a film, because you can't condense as much into a movie as you can into a 10-part series. So there's a lot of leg room to explore the nuances, to get the storytelling right, to kind of etch out several supporting characters. So I feel a series does better justice to it than a movie.
Right. And lately, we have been experiencing a lot of remakes from the past couple of years. Again, we cannot draw a line in art what to make and what not to. But do you think creating a Lord of the Rings season will excite the viewers and revive the fanship? Or it just, raises questions like we are running out of ideas?
I'm very disputed on that. I feel classics shouldn't be touched. I'm a firm belief that you cannot adapt something as beautiful as Lord of the Rings. But that said, we can't 100% be dissing and dismissive of something unless it has been made. You never know. They might actually enhance it. They might take it to a larger audience. I understand where the remake culture comes from. It is the idea basically is to reach out to more people, to a larger set of audience. And I feel if done right, it can. That said, I don't know if this is really reflective of a creative bankruptcy amongst writers. Like, why are you touching classics? You can do your own original shows. Look what Black Mirror has done. It's fantastic. So yeah, that's my 2 bits on that. I feel it shouldn't be touched, but if you're doing it, please do it right. Don't go wrong with it.
Mohar, moving to our next story, Time's Up, along with other online magazines, condemns Disney over gendered attack on Scarlett Johansson over lawsuit. So it seems like women are still treated as second-class citizens in the movie industry. What is your thought on that?
I absolutely agree. If anything, look at the remuneration gap between male and female actors. I think that itself says that there is a major, I wouldn't say mistreatment, but major inequality between the two genders when it comes to the film industry. When I first read the story of Scarlett suing Disney, I was 100% on board with her. Disney claims that this is about the global effects of the pandemic and how it has monetarily affected business. Sure. I think as actors, as producers, as writers, as people in the film industry, we completely understand that. We are empathetic towards it. But there are monetary commitments made on the basis of theatrical. How do you plan to remunerate the actor who has suffered a loss? Like, for example, if I'm hypothetically speaking, if Scarlett Johansson has lost a certain amount of money, it is Disney's responsibility to say that, hey, we'll make up for it by offering you another project, which will kind of make up for the losses on this project. There has to be some payback. If you expect an actor to take some sort of a remuneration cut, you have to give them some incentive for it. I'm completely with Scarlett on what has happened, and I do agree that they wouldn't have been able to pull this off with a male actor as they have been able to do with Scarlett. And I'm glad that people in Hollywood do speak up against these things, because it's absolutely uncalled for. As it is, female actors are not paid as much as their male counterparts. When they are getting paid as much, you're kind of citing a very ridiculous reason. Yeah, of course, the pandemic has affected everyone. It has affected Scarlett as much as it's affected Disney. So I don't see a reason why she should be paid less on the basis of that. And if she's being paid less, she has to be remunerated or given a payback in some form or the other. Offer her another film, do something else. Why has the matter even reached court? That means they have not taken her consent and done this, which is wrong.
Absolutely.
She's a party who kind of deserves the money because she's worked on it.
And with the pandemic, Mohar, affecting the entertainment industry badly, streaming services did work as a ray of light, especially for the actors and filmmakers. However, it seems like the streaming services are now trying to take over the industry, which will not be able to keep good ties between the filmmakers and streaming companies. What is your take on that?
No, I don't entirely agree with that. I don't think, at the end of the day, streaming services are just an alternative to production, to theatrical production. And they're all operated by more or less the same set of people. So I don't think this is one over the other. This could have, this is an industry problem. It's not a streaming versus OTT versus theatrical problem. It's an industry problem. This could have happened in a different setup with Scarlett. And the issue at its core is very simple. An actress is not getting paid what she was promised. That is the issue. And I think it's an industry and industry culture problem, and not so much a streaming versus theatrical problem.
Right.
That I do not agree with.
Right. Mohar, thank you very much indeed. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
That was Mohar Basu discussing the top stories with us, and now moving to other story details of the day. Kanye West's new album, Donda, is set to release on Friday, while The Weeknd also plans to drop his new single, Take My Breath, on the same day. The Weeknd revealed in his latest interview that he would love to work with Kanye again. After his interview, West shared a screenshot on Instagram of his recent call log, which features numerous calls with Abel Weeknd. The call log left fans wondering whether they've got a surprise in store. The singers last collaborated on Kanye West's The Life of Pablo song. Italian fashion brand Liu Zhou is suing Kendall Jenner for allegedly breaching the terms of a modeling contract requiring her to appear for 2 photo shoots. Reuters reported on Wednesday, according to a legal complaint filed by Liu Zhou, Jenner only took part in first of 2 planned photo shoots but never turned up for the second one, which had originally been due to take place in March 2020 but was delayed because of the coronavirus pandemic. Reuters reported that Liu Zhou is seeking at least $1.8 million in damages, according to the complaint. Liu Zhou, which the complaint says has already paid $1.35 million to Jenner for services covered by the 2019 contract, said it tried to reschedule the second photo shoot multiple times but obtained no response from Jenner. More than 2 years after it was first announced, the first officially authorized and endorsed full-length Led Zeppelin documentary has been completed, featuring unprecedented access to the band, including new interviews with Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, and John Paul Jones, the first and only time the trio have participated in a documentary in 50 years. Becoming Led Zeppelin covers the band's early years through the moment in 1970 when Led Zeppelin II displaced the Beatles' Abbey Road from the peak of the Billboard album chart in America. The documentary was directed by Londoner Bernard McMahon, best known for his 2017 documentary series American Epic, and will feature a never-before-seen archive film and photographs, state-of-the-art audio transfer of Zeppelin's music and the music of other artists who shaped their sound. The new Venom Let There Be Carnage trailer has dropped, and it is a fright test. The movie is the sequel to 2018 comic book film starring Tom Hardy, who is also working in the latest release. Hardy is tasked with covering a serial killer, Cletus Kasady, played by Harrelson, who turns into Carnage. The movie is set to be released in UK in September 15th and in US on September 24th. And that is it from the newsroom. We will be right back after a quick short break with a movie review. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Today we will be reviewing the 2005 release Pride and Prejudice. Mrs. Bennet insists that her daughters find rich husbands and settle down in life. When a wealthy bachelor starts living near them, Mrs. Bennet's happiness knows no bounds. Based on the 1813 romantic novel of Manners by Jane Austen, the movie won an Oscar nomination for Best Picture and a BAFTA award for Outstanding Debut by writer, director, and producer. To review the movie, we are joined by entertainment journalist and film critic Jamie Lowe. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's obvious that a movie cannot do a book any justice. The original Pride and Prejudice itself, but do you believe it was a fairly good attempt?
I mean, I'm not a massive Jane Austen writer. I think this was actually the first time this film that I've ever been exposed to any of Jane Austen's writings. And, you know, I don't probably look like your classic romantic novel fiction reader. But in terms of what I understand about how this film was made and the book itself, I believe it to be a accurate, almost down-to-earth adaptation or representation of what is, you know, a story that's really stood the test of time. This has been one of many remakes that we've had of it. But of course, you know, we were saying earlier that there's an earlier adaptation of the film that people tend to prefer when it comes to Pride and Prejudice.
Right. And Jamie, I would like you to comment on the cinematography and the flow of the movie, as it sure is a long one. But how do you think it keeps the viewer hooked onto a screen? And do you even think that it keeps the viewer hooked onto a screen while watching it?
I mean, the most interesting part for me, I'll freely admit I'm not a great fan of love stories, but what was really the most interesting part for me was the historical aspect to it. I felt like I was really getting a look into these people's lives, a social class of people that doesn't really exist anymore. The landed gentry, as they were once called. So that was really the most interesting part for me, is to take a tour through what people's lives were hundreds of years ago. So that kept me going. But I think for classic fans of this film and real fans of Jane Austen's works, they were there for this unraveling love story, this really mysterious character, Mr. Darcy, who doesn't give away much. And then you finally understand why it's called Pride and Prejudice. It's Elizabeth's prejudices and Mr. Darcy's pride, which ultimately get in the way of a great love story. And I think we've all seen that maybe in, a relationship with our friends, people that would be very good together, but they're just too stubborn to even accept each other's interests.
Absolutely. Surprisingly, Keira Knightley was she was criticized for the role that she, appeared in. How would you rate Keira Knightley's performance as Elizabeth Bennet, since she sparkles in this role, but there were some critics who happened to be disappointed in the way she depicted this role?
Well, listen, it was a remake of a film which people hold dear. Don't forget, there was a BBC series with Colin Firth as well, who played Mr. Darcy. And this is like a story that I think people are very protective over. So when this new wave of actresses, Rosamund Pike, she was playing Elizabeth's sister. When this new wave of actresses come in and sort of revolutionise with a new, obviously behind the screen team too, then I think some people's noses will be put out of joint. But I did think, I'm again not a great fan of Pride and Prejudice adaptations and haven't watched much of any of them, but I did feel like this was quite a fresh take on what can be probably looked at as quite a stuffy story. I really I had trouble getting myself to sit down and actually watch this film, but I was surprised to see that it was actually not a stuffy historical romantic film. There was difficult dialogue, but I could keep up with it. And I think the storytelling and the cinematography.
Yeah, there was no complexity in the movie.
Yeah, and I think that was a real entry point for people like me who don't watch romantic films and don't read these books. If you don't understand the narrative before you go in, maybe it's hard to break it all down if they're talking in strange historical language. But because it was so accessible, I think I maybe enjoyed it more than I would have.
Right. The cast has done an amazing job, of course, but I would really like you to comment on Mr. Darcy's character played by Matthew Macfadyen.
Yeah, now I've seen Matthew in many things. He's a great British actor. He actually played a central role in a spy TV series that I'm very fond of called Spooks. So it was nice to see someone that I knew of in the film. But his character is, I think I've been reading up on how other people have seen his character, and what I've seen a lot of is if you watch it several times, you can see the minutiae, the acting coming from his eyes. Mr. Darcy is a very guarded character. He says he's not very good at speaking to people, but I think if you watch closely enough, he is talking to people, not with words, but with his eyes. And if you understand what you do at the end of the film and go back and watch the first few scenes where Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth meet, you can see what was brewing from the beginning. And that's really interesting. I think that's, a real mark of a good actor.
Right. Jamie, the 1995 version was very much critically compared with the 2000 version. As for the 1995 version, the amount of cream, light pink, white, light blue dresses, these were very accurate to the era. The seasonal colors are also very accurate. As for the designs on these dresses, the 95 version is the most accurate. The 2005 version just lacks structure and complexity. So do you think that it is always necessary to, add more complexity in order to make a better version? Or whenever you're remaking a movie, you need to add, structures and complexity?
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe that version of the film was, so heavy on the production, so ornate, and it was a film that you watch if you like big ballrooms and dresses and grand homes. But the 2005 adaptation, there was that, but not in excess. And I think, from what I've been reading and what I understand, the Bennets that were depicted in the book weren't necessarily that high of a social class, so they wouldn't have been overly rich and overly ostentatious. And to a point, I think that's in the 2005's benefit. Maybe the people who were disappointed in the 2005 film, maybe that's what they were expecting. They were going into the film expecting an over-the-top production, and what you got was a more down-to-earth one. So maybe that's where people were left disappointed. But I think, I've said this before, but I think that's in the film's benefit, for me at least. For people like me who aren't too bothered about ball gowns and fancy dances and, intense romantic scenes. It had a bit of character to it, which maybe is missed out when you put all your attention on huge dresses and tiaras and balls and things like that.
Right. In its final minutes, with a traditional ending, it makes you believe in true love, the union of soulmates, happily ever after, and all the other tougher romantic comedy promises. But I would really like you to comment on the language, the literature, and dialogue delivery, which is something truly captivating.
Yeah, and actually it was quite far into the film when I realised that they weren't necessarily talking like I do. It was the scene where Darcy and Elizabeth, where Darcy, divulges his love to Elizabeth, and it's raining, and she gets very angry with him. It was when she did her little fast, angry sort of retort to Darcy, which is when I realised, oh, they're speaking in a slightly different sort of dialects and syntax that we do now. So maybe they've adjusted it slightly to be more palatable for modern ears. But there was definitely an aspect of historical language in there, which didn't prevent me from understanding it very often, but occasionally it would sort of catch me out, and I'd think, well, what has she just said there? So, I think to its benefit, they maybe used just enough of the language of the time.
Right. Jamie, it was great discussing this movie with you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks again.
That was Jamie Lowe reviewing Pride and Prejudice, and that is it from today's episode. We hope you liked it. Don't forget to share your feedback on the social media link mentioned down below. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care and goodbye.